In the last video, you were to create these composition sketches, so you should have 3 of them, and you should have chosen one of them that you want to transfer to a collage. So what we're doing is basically your initial design, and it may change. You want it to represent that principle that you chose. So we're going to take a look at just a few of these. So this one, the student's principle was movement. And I mean, sometimes, since it's abstract art, not everyone might agree on it, but this was just for this particular project. For me, my eye kind of moves through this piece, and then this arrow kind of helps it back up. Now, some may question if the arrow is objective art, and maybe it is, so maybe stray away from that, but there's still a lot of movement in this piece. This one, you could probably say a type of balance. I would say maybe symmetrical or asymmetrical, since it's almost mirrored. It's just not mirrored in the colors. You could also say some sort of pattern as well. And then this one over here is emphasis, where our eye is kind of drawn to the center here. So with these collages, or you're making one, sorry, you're just making one collage, I have some requirements, but they're not to restrict you. They're just to force you to kind of experiment with different things. So I don't want you to feel bound. I'm very flexible with this project. So I'm going to get started, and I am going to go through each of these and how you can apply them to your artwork. I have my sketches here, and this is the one I'm going to do contrast in here. And I have my piece of paper. So again, this paper should be like the size of your sketchbook cover that we created. So maybe like roughly 6 by 9. And then I printed out the requirements. You don't have to, but if it's easier for you, I like to go through and check them off. So the first thing we're going to do is the background. And we're looking at the background and the color scheme. So for the background, we are just going to do watercolor. So watercolor, and then number 2, the color scheme, you need to choose one. Watercolor background, you can do a variety of things. Here are just some examples. You could do streaks like this or blotches like this. You could even go through and do some type of patterning with the paint, and then go back through and kind of do some Zentangling in the white areas. That's what was done here. And then the warm versus the cool is, again, the color scheme doesn't mean you can't use just warm and just cool. So looking at some of these, so here's the backgrounds, here's a cool color, here's a warm color. Looking at this one, I would say this is predominantly a cool color collage, but you see hints of warm colors in there. Same here, like the yellow is technically a warm color, but we could say that this is predominantly cool. My little composition sketch is landscape. I'm going to turn my paper this way. And since I'm doing contrast, there's one side very chaotic, and then the other side is very, smooth and simple in contrast with this side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break this up. And remember, we're using watercolor in the background, and the color scheme I chose was warm. So with my brush, I'm going to go ahead and choose warm colors. So I'm going to apply my color kind of similar to my drawing. So I got a red there. And again, you don't have to do it exactly like your sketch. This may change. You may even change principles, and that's totally fine, as long as you are still representing that principle visually. I should say that you don't have to paint it exactly like your sketchbook or your sketch, because you might be using other materials to create this. So you could just do a flat color. I'm just doing this, and it may get covered up, but I'm just doing it just to kind of go along with it. But you can absolutely just do a plain flat color, that's fine. So I just finished painting my background, and now I'm going to move on to steps 4 and 5. These 2 steps go together because you are going to be looking for 3 different types of paper to use, and with these papers you are going to execute a collage technique. So number 5 asks for 3 different types of paper material in your collage, and this can literally be anything. Like, it doesn't even have to be paper. I should just say materials, honestly. So go around your house, and I want you to find just pieces of paper. I've got notebook paper. You can use old receipts, junk mail, tissue paper, magazines, literally news, whatever you can find. That's what you're going to use for this project, and you need to find 3 different types. So 3 different types of materials that you can cut up and use for this collage. The techniques that you're going to use to cut up your paper are tearing and cutting and fragmenting, and they're pretty much what they sound like. You're going to choose one to use in your collage. So tearing and cutting is whatever paper or materials you have, you're going to tear some of them and you're going to cut some of them and glue them down. Fragmenting is kind of neat. It's when you have one picture, one whole picture, and you cut it up in a certain shape and you kind of rearrange it, reorder it onto your collage. So here is another example as well, where they used one picture and just rearranged it. They cut it up into squares. And then here is the cutting and tearing over here. They have cut strips, and then they tore out little square, boxes, and then they also cut out little triangle pieces for a pattern. Okay, so the materials I chose were this junk mail, a receipt, and some tissue paper. And the collaging technique that I am going to do is fragmenting. So I'm going to be fragmenting with this piece of junk mail, and I'm going to be cutting it up in circles, and then I'm going to arrange those circles on my base piece of paper. So I just used something around my house to trace some circles on my paper. Now I'm going to cut them out. I have my papers cut out and laid out on my base paper. So you can see this is where the junk mail came in, they're pine trees. And then I cut up the Walmart receipt, and then I even balled up some of this tissue paper. It is so flexible as to what you can do. It's really hard to do it wrong. I want you to experiment. I want you to layer, try different techniques and things and arrangements to something that you like. To glue down, I don't have a glue stick. Unbelievable, right? I'm an art teacher. So I have Mod Podge. If you only have like liquid glue, you can use that. Honestly, sometimes that works better. But if you have a glue stick, you can start laying things down. And that's what I'm going to do. I'll take a brush and dip it in here and just start laying this down to make this more permanent. But the next requirement on the piece of paper before I glue, you need to have something hand drawn. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to be drawing maybe some things in here, but this is literally, you can do it wherever you want. You can make it simple, you can make it complex. What I have done before is I draw Zentangles on a separate sheet of paper, and then with some scissors I cut them out, and then I can have them glued onto here, and that counts as my hand-drawn thing in my collage. You could even think about cutting up your sketches, and well, wait till you take a picture. But, just maybe old drawings, something hand-drawn has to be on here. This is another example of a hand-drawn element in your collage. So this one, I actually made this one, and it's also kind of the same concept of contrast that I'm doing now. So this plain side over here, my hand-drawn element is just some white straight lines. So I just use white charcoal pencil, and that could count as your hand-drawn element. Or over here, the white space Zentangling, that would count. And then this person used that white charcoal pencil as well to create a design in there. You can use whatever type of medium you want. Ballpoint pen, a highlighter, pencil, anything, colored pencil, crayon, just something has to be hand-drawn in your collage. The very last requirement on the paper, number 7, is you need something printed. So what I'm going to use is, usually we use India ink, but since you have the watercolors with you, or you can use acrylic paint if you have it, you are going to, if you find something, like I have this marker, and I'm going to use some black acrylic paint just because it's really dark and it'll stand out. You can use whatever color you want, but I would recommend a darker color. And I am going to just paint the bottom of this highlighter, and I already made a little example right there, and I'm going to just print. So right down on the paper, I haven't glued this stuff yet, but so a print, just like that. Find something plastic or harder to put this watercolor paint on or acrylic paint and then kind of stamp around your artwork. We're going to do one more final check. So looking at my requirements, my background is watercolor, color scheme is warm colors. I did add some green because I needed a little pop of some even more contrast. So even though there's contrast within the composition, there's also contrast with colors. So I did add a cool color in there. My collage technique was fragmenting. I also did technically like some cutting, so just some strips. And I did actually rip these up to ball them up, but and then 3 different types of paper. I have receipt paper, magazine, and tissue paper. And then something hand-drawn. I have the Zentangling right here, and I even used a ballpoint pen on this side to create some straight lines. And then the last one is something printed. So I printed kind of all around here. And side note, if your paint is kind of running out on your printing, it looks kind of cool. Before we end, I'm going to show you some bad examples and then really good examples. So you have seen this before. Remember that this is abstract art. So you can't be creating something that is objective that we would recognize, everyone would agree on and recognize right away. So make sure you don't have any smiley faces or ice cream cones. These are really good examples. I really love how they experimented with the materials, and you can see like cardboard in here, just different, all the layering and the materials. I just love, every pattern and every little detail that went into each of these. I want you to think outside the box. I want you to use materials that you wouldn't think to use in art class.